Welcome to this Figma for Developer mini-series. In this video, which is going to be 30 minutes long, plus some additional notes that I'll be talking about, I'll give you the bare bones necessary and minimum information that you need to create something like this that you see on the screen. In this mini-series, I will be focusing on teaching Figma specifically for developers. My name is Armin, and this class is part of a Udemy class that I've created. You can check out the link. I'll include it in the description or in the video. The class teaches students how to build this project. In the class, I showed a very quick snapshot of this design, but I didn't go over how to build the design. So this is an optional additional video that relates to that class. But I made it generic enough so if you landed onto this video from YouTube, you don't have to take that class. You can follow along and learn how to use Figma. This is not a UX UI class or course. This is just showing you how to use Figma as a tool to create wireframes. So this is a 4-part series. The first video, which is this one, is going to be in 30 minutes. Within the 30 minutes, you'll have enough knowledge to be able to create what you see in the screen right here. However, if you watch the rest of the videos, we will learn the proper way of doing things, the Figma way, that you can essentially convert all of this and create something like this, which you'll save time, and the UI that you create, it's much more reusable. You can share it with other people. It's much more an engineered approach to creating the wireframes, where this is more kind of just throw in haphazardly, just get it out of the way. Both methods are okay, but in my opinion, if you want to do this and you want to do it right, I would suggest watch the full series so you can make something like this. The end result is the same, and let me show you how that looks like. I'll go over the layout, details, and everything in a second, but just let me show you what the final result looks like. So this is the UX and UI. Essentially, it showcases how our app is going to function. So our application is a translator app that takes user input, the sentence, and user selects the input language and then the output language. And then they click on translate, they'll see the results. So I've created interactions here. So I'm pretending to enter some sentence here. I'm pretending to select the language here, and I'll click translate. It shows that it's loading, and then we'll get some translation here. Next up, I can click on the top avatar button where I can register, and here shows the registration process. So if I didn't type a right email or the email already exists, it shows an error message here. And then once I updated the email, I can click register. It will show the loading indicator. Then it will ask for a verification. Once confirmed, it will take me to the user version of the translation page, where here, once I input my sentence and define my language, I'll click on translate, and it will do the translation and keep a record of all the translations I've done. And it shows on the left panel on the past translations, as you can see. So if let's say if I switch the language and I translate a few more like so, I apologize for the screen size. This flash is essentially the same screen. It just changes the size. So with this change, you can see we have 3 previous translations. I can click between these and go back and forth between the translations. It will update the data that was inputted on the right side. And you can actually delete translations too, like so. And that's pretty much it as far as is user UI workflow. And let me show you how the proper version looks like. This is the design file, and let me click on main start, or let me click on this and click play so we get a full screen version. So essentially the same thing. I'll click on translate. It will show some loading indicators. It will show a loading screen here. I'll click on this, same idea. I can register, click on register, confirm, and then start translating, which will show me some the left panel here. I can go back and forth between the translations, and it should show the updated screen. I can log out, and I can come back here, log in, same result. So it doesn't have all the steps because I skipped a few, but that's no deal. The overall idea is that both of these are giving you the same workflow, but as you can see, the design for one It's far more simpler, far more organized. And since Figma, if you're going to share this with other people to get feedback, I think it's much more better to do it the clean way. Okay, with that said, let's get started. So don't just watch the video, try following along and make mistakes, and that's how you'll learn. So first things first, Figma, you can run it in two ways, either from the browser or you can download a desktop version. Both of them, as far as performance goes and functionality, are identical. Both of them are running on Node.js, Wasm, so essentially you're getting the same thing. So once you open up Figma, this is the page that you'll be presented, something like this. I have too many projects, that's why you see so many files in here and on the left side. And what you can do on the left, you can create different teams. And this team essentially represents your, I guess, your company or a subgroup in the company. And within that subgroup, you can create multiple projects. And in that project, if you select one of these team projects, for example, you can then click on the top right button that says design file, not the FigJam, the design file. And this is the file that it will create for you. So let me delete this and show you how that looks like. So first off, just to explain to you, the view that you're seeing here, I adjusted the scale of the UI. Normally this is kind of small, so you can also adjust your view by going into view and then interface scale, and you can make it larger or smaller or do the shortcut. Or you can click on reset to go to 100%. So the top portion or the toolbar, essentially, it's comprised of three sections. The middle section is the name of our file. You can see we have untitled here. You can click on it and then rename it to something else. The right panel, we're going to ignore most of these functions except the play button here and the zoom button here. The play button is going to be used when you want to execute your user interface in a prototype mode, like I showed earlier. And the zoom, you're rarely going to use this unless you want to type your specific zoom. We're going to use keyboard shortcuts to adjust the zoom value. The left section, those are the tools that you most often will be using. Personally, as a developer, the two main tools that I use is the shape tool, the drawing tool. Once in a while, maybe the pen tool and the text input box. And also maybe the plugins here. I have one plugin that I use to add icons in case of kind of moving further from wireframe to something more realistic. And also the second one is just this one where you create frames, sections. Slices I haven't used, and I don't think that's very useful for us as developers to be bothered with. It's more design focused. And you have the selection tool and scale, which I use keyboard shortcuts, and I'll go over in a second. The canvas is the main portion of the screen, which is this gray area that you see. This is where essentially we'll be drawing our components. So if I go on the top from our toolbar, click on one of these shapes and select the rectangle, I can go to my canvas and drag and drop and create a rectangle. And also I can select the text box here and click here and add a text. In the canvas, I created two elements. And now the most important thing and the most feature that you'll be using quite a lot, and you need to kind of practice if you're not used to these design diagrams, is maneuvering around the canvas. So the hand button that you see here, which is called the hand tool, once you select, you can click and drag, and then you'll pan around your canvas like so. However, I don't use this manually by going and clicking the hands. My selection is always in the move mode, and I have my left arm on the keyboard, and I hold the space key, and then it'll automatically switch to the hand tool. Then I can click and drag and move around so I can pan around my canvas like so. And if I let go of the space, you can see the hand mode is gone out, it's gone away, so we're back to the move tool. So hold down the space key, click and drag to move around the pan around the canvas. You're not moving the object. So if I click on, if I create another shape, let's say a circle over here, and then hold the space, you can see that I'm moving the camera essentially in the canvas, panning across, not moving the objects itself. To move the objects, you can actually click on the object without holding space or anything, and then you can move them around like so. The other keyboard shortcut that I use frequently is the zoom feature. You can change the zoom from here, but I rarely use it. So you can, on the keyboard, I have my left hand again. I hold down the command button on Mac, but I think it's control on Windows. Then while holding that, you can use the scroll. You can use the mouse scroll to zoom in and zoom out. So these two shortcuts, you'll use it frequently to move around the canvas. So if you're not familiar with this, take some time to practice. For example, hold down the space, move the camera so you center the circle, hold down the command and scroll up and down to zoom in and zoom out into the circle, and do the same to the square, zoom into the text, for example, and zoom out. So practice it a bit if you're not used to these shortcuts. So if you notice when I am selecting different elements here, and let me zoom in so we're on 100% or a bit above 100%. If I select the text here, on the right panel you see different options are popping up. And if I select the circle, the options change. The right panel is the context sensitive panel. What that means is based on what I select on my canvas, the appropriate attributes for that element are displayed on the right. So if I select the text here, which I have, on the right you can see I have the text area, which you can select your text font, your font, whether it's regular or bold. See, if I switch to bold, you can see the effect over here. If I change the size to, let's say 20, the text size increases, and so forth. The most commonly used features or attributes that I change for most of the objects are stroke and fill. Effects, you can add drop-down shadow, but for wireframing, we don't need to do any of that. So for example, if I select the circle, I can come here and add a stroke, and there are two buttons here. You can see there's these 4 dots, and there's this plus button. The plus button, if you click on it, it will add the stroke, and you can add multiple strokes, but don't bother with that. We're keeping it simple here. Then it will add an entry here for the stroke. Then you can click on the color and select the color. Because it's a wireframe, we can keep it black and white. And there's a negative minus button here on the side where upon clicking, it will remove the stroke. Same with the fill. You can remove the fill by doing the same thing or add the fill and change the color to your liking. If you remove the fill, you can move around this object and you can see the background is transparent, but we're not going to use that feature here in this video. The right panel also has 2 tabs. It's not evident by first glance. There's a design tab and a prototype tab. I'll explain the prototype tab once we get to that point, but essentially once you're designing or you're making changes to the look and feel, keep it in the design tab so you can see the attributes. The prototype is used when we're creating interactions between our frames or elements or buttons. The other important feature here is the attributes of the objects. You got the X and Y, which in this video, we're not going to manually type it, but instead, once we start moving it, you can see automatically the X and Y changes. The width and height is also there. You can type it in to make it more specific. And in the next few videos, once I teach you a bit more complicated features or a bit more advanced Figma unique features, I'll go more details into some additional features there are here. And if you select multiple objects on the top, you can see the alignment options pop up. So you can click on align vertically and all the objects are aligned vertically as you can see here. And there are other options such as horizontally, distribute them vertically or horizontally. The left panel is comprised of 3 sections. So the top section are the pages where you can create multiple pages here, and each page you can have their own each individual features. Because this is a paid version, I can add more than 3 pages. If you're using the free version, which I recommend if you're starting off, just go with the free, you have a limited of 3 pages. Okay, I deleted all the pages. So the top section are the pages. You can collapse this if you're not moving around pages quite a lot. And here's on the top, you can see there's pages and there's a button here, chevron button, that upon clicking, it will collapse or open the pages section. On the left side, you can see there are tabs. So one is layers that's currently being displayed, and there's an assets one, which I'll go over in the next few videos and explain what this is for. But most of the time you'll be watching, you'll have this layer selected and be playing around with this bottom section. So let me collapse this pages because we're not going to move around. So as you can see, we have 3 elements on the canvas, and on the left we have 3 elements shown in our layers. This layers basically represent all the objects that are in our canvas. So if I select the circle, you can see the appropriate ellipse is selected. Essentially it's an ellipse, but with the width and height being the same, it's a circle. If I select the text on canvas, this element is selected, or from the outline, if I select the rectangle, it selects this for me. You might ask, why is this needed? Well, if you start creating hierarchies, then you won't see the hierarchy in the canvas. You can see it in your outline. What is a hierarchy? Essentially, when you start grouping elements, and let me show you how that's done. So let's say I want to group this text with this rectangle. So I'll select both of these, and I'll hold down Command and G, and this created a group. What does that mean? That if I come and click this rectangle and move it, the text will move along with it. This is no longer 2 different objects. This is a group. However, on the left panel, and you can see that's represented as a group. But if I expand this, I can still select individual elements within this group. So I can select the text and move it about within the group. I can select the group and move the group, and the group is not moving, is moving all of the items relative to the base canvas. And finally, we have our frames here. Frames represent a screen that we are mocking or creating the wireframes in. So these are elements and they need to belong within a frame. A frame can be a mobile screen, it can be a desktop or a iPad screen. So once you click on the frame, you can see you have several options here on the right panel. You have phone, tablet, or you can just click and drag and create your custom size frame. You have the option of selecting one of those predefined frame sizes by selecting your frame. So once I select the frame, create the frame, I can select it by clicking on the name of the frame here or from the outline. Then on the right, I can click on this frame, drop down, and select one of these preset screen sizes. So I'll go with iPad mini, and I'll change the I'll change it to landscape and start a portrait and zoom out so you can see the size of this frame and the size of the elements relative to the screen. And if you noticed, once I added the frame, I added it so it kind of covered both of these elements. And once I did that, on the outline, what it did is it created this parent frame and then added all the elements inside this frame. So if I move this circle outside of this frame, you can see now our ellipse has moved outside of the frame. So with that said, you have all the basics elements that you need to create your mockups. And let's actually start creating the mockup. So whatever we went over, we kind of covered the basics. You can see them used within the context of our project. So let's begin creating a few of our mocks. And I'm going to delete everything from this frame. Let me zoom in here and write down all the functions that our application has. So this gives a good context to kind of know where we're standing. So our application has a register feature, register confirmation view, login view or function, a logout view, and we have the public translation, and finally our user's translation. I'm going to select all of these and go on the top and just distribute them vertically so they're nice. So I am going to create the register confirm views and then leave the rest to you, and then I'll go directly to user translation. With those 3, you should be get by. You should know how to create the rest. So with our frame here, I'm going to create the register view. In the middle here, I am going to create a simple rectangle, and I'll keep the color gray light gray here. And I'll add the text register here. Then I'll create a couple of groups that represent our input box. So I'll create a rectangle like so, and I'll add the background white, and I'll add a stroke. So when wireframing, it's easy to keep things, it's much more easier to keep things simple. And one of the ways is keeping your colors no more than 3 maybe, or 4, let's say red if you want to show some air or some sort of a pointer. But black, white, and gray, that should be enough. And I also add a stroke to almost every element. So in this case, for example, this fill, I can make it white, and I can add a stroke, and this is good enough for this stage of our prototyping. So this register is too bold. Let me go and select a regular size. You can see I selected it, and on the right panel, under the text, I switched from bold to regular. Now I'm going to select both of these and hold down Command and G so I can group them. So there you go. I have a group here, and I'll move this over here. And I will edit the text. And the way to do that, with the group selected, either I can come here and select the text from the outline view, or double click inside this group, which will take me down one level inside the group, allowing me to select individual children of this group. So I'll double select the register and type in email. And outside the canvas, I'll double click to move out of that mode. So I'll select the group again, and I'll hold Command and D to duplicate. And then I'll move it down like so. And you can hold Shift to kind of move vertically or horizontally to keep in lane. I use that quite a lot. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to double click here and type in password, because the register page, we want both. And you can see I'm clicking outside of this element, so I can click out. And I'm going to duplicate this again and add retype password. Now let me extend this because I need to add a button here. And a button is essentially the same thing. I'm going to create a rectangle here, make this all black, and add a text here and say register. I'll make the text all white and move this over here. And I'll select both of these and come over the align and align this horizontally and vertically. Select both of these objects, hold Command G to group them. Now I have a button. I'll just move this button over here. And that is it. We created our registration view. You can come here and fix it like so if you want to make it more proper. However, I would avoid doing it, especially after watching this video. In the next videos, I'll show you how to do all of this automatically. So you need to spend time clicking on these and then adjusting the size. That's not the right way of doing things. Okay, so we created the registration, and you can see here on the left panel, I have all of these items kind of dangling. They don't belong to a frame. And I have frame 1. I could double click on frame 1 and call it register. I can click on register now, the frame, and I can hold down Command and D so to duplicate the frame. By duplicating the frame, it automatically creates one to its right side or up and down depending on the previous position you picked, but mostly it will be to the right. And I'll rename this to register confirm and come over here and just say verify code. And email and code here. And I'm going to delete this retype password group and come over here and start register, say confirm. I can come to this group and select both of these elements and then horizontally, vertically align. There you go. So I've created our register and register confirmation page, and we can actually dive in and start creating our interactions or prototypes. And for that, I'm going to add one more button here, just so just for teaching purposes. I'm going to move this up and duplicate it and create another one on the bottom here. Or a better approach would be to duplicate and move this up. The bottom one, I'm going to call this cancel. So instead, if user wants to cancel registration, they have that option, let's say. Now, I'm going to go on the top right where the context sensitive properties panel shows, click on prototype. Now come over here and you can see once I hover the mouse over different elements in my canvas, and don't pay attention to the right one, let's look at here. You can see these circles, these dots are popping up on the corners like so. These are essentially allowing us to, once you hover your mouse over them, you'll see that the icon changes to a circle icon. So what we can do here, we can come to this register button, select one of these circles, it doesn't matter, just for organization's sake, because the frame that I want to attach this register to will be the right, I'll just do the right side circle. I'll click and drag and move this and attach this to this register confirm frame. I cannot connect it to different elements inside the frame. I can only connect a action to a frame, like so. Once I release the mouse, this pop-up will appear, and you can see there are different options here. If I click here, there's the different actions that it can detect on drag while hovering, mouse enter, mouse out, or delay. So we want it to be on click or on tap, which will navigate to this register confirmation screen and leave the animation mode or transition mode to be instant. If you've used PowerPoint, transitions are, you'll be familiar with transitions where it will dissolve to the next PowerPoint slide, etc., etc. So with that, I'm going to do the same on the verify code. I'm going to select cancel and then drag and drop to the original frame. And there you go. So what's going to happen is that once user clicks on register, it will show this frame. And once user clicks on cancel, it'll go back to the register frame. To test this interaction out, click on register and click on the play button on the top right. Now you can see we have this view, and because the frame we selected iPad and this is a paid version, you'll see the iPad frame here. The default free version, you won't see it. You won't see this extra fancy stuff. So if I click on register, you can see we're presented with verification code view. And if I click cancel, it'll go back to the register view. Okay, we can leave this open and come back over here. So essentially you have enough information to create the rest. I'll do one more, which is the user translation. It's a bit more complicated view. So we'll do that in a second. But overall, this is all you need to do. All you need to know in order to create your wireframes. Again, not recommend you to do it this way. Please watch the next few videos if you have time. Okay, so let's create our user translations page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the register and move it down here. And then we remove this prototype. And this is essentially going to be sort of like an exercise at this point. So user translation. And what we want to do is we want to have a translation section, and I'm going to actually group all of these together. So we want to have a translation section on the right, something similar like this, but let me first increase the size of this rectangle. Just move it over here and move. And you can also, this is a good time to show you, you can see this rectangle has a lock button on the left panel in the outline. You can click on that. So once you can come here and select everything else and not the rectangle itself. So, or you can select the rest from the outline. I think this is easier visually to kind of see what you're selecting. No, actually that doesn't work. I have to come and individually select all the elements in the outline and move them like so. Okay, so here I'm going to come and delete. This is going to say translate, and this is input text. So I have my input text, and I'm going to just make this slightly bigger. And if I bring your mouse over in the corners, you can see it changes its cursor. So when it changes the cursor to that icon, you can extend the shape like so. Let's go back to, let's move these guys down, further down here. And then we're gonna have the similar things like the input text here. I'll duplicate this, move it over here and call it translated text. And this one will say translate. Okay, so now for this field, we'll say input language. And here's a good point to bring up regarding text. And you can see once I typed in the input language, it kind of went away. It's hiding underneath this rectangle here. So I can move this out and you can see now it's popped up. But on the right side under text, there are these three buttons here that will determine how your text is rendered. One, you have the fixed size, which if I do fixed size and select this, it's essentially determining the box size for this, that it's fixed. And then you have the middle option, which is the auto height. And you can see adjust the height so to display everything. And then on the far left, we have the auto width. So whatever we type in here, let's say input language selected, it will always adjust the size of these text box that is text container that is used to render our text. Okay, so we have the input language and I'll duplicate this and we have output language. And I have to move around these text messages. So output language and come back and select the text and do auto width. Okay. And I'll move the translated text box slightly up here and move the translate button over here. Okay. And now I'm going to come back here and adjust the rectangle. And the reason why I left this top area empty is because essentially we're going to need to create this navigation bar here. And I'll make the fill white and I'll add a stroke. And I'll come back over here and add a circle. Essentially, you can see I'm kind of, if you've used Photoshop Paint, it's very similar to what I'm doing in Photoshop, however, with the much more vectorized manner. So if you're familiar with tools like Illustrator or Inkscape, it's much more closer to using those tools. And let me select these two and group them and actually come over back here and add a title here. So translator app. And I'll move this in the center. There you go. All right, and last piece, I am going to just duplicate this and move this to the left side and just shrink the size of this thing or start deleting these elements. You can see if I adjust the size, it adjusts the size of the button itself. So what I can do is select, double click to select the rectangle underneath and then adjust its size. So now this works. Okay, so let me add a fill color here. And actually, we don't even need this button. So let's come and select this rectangle. Let's change the fill to be, let's go with black to make things simple. And now all we need to do is create our translations here. Set this to white, add a stroke, and you can see I'm kind of repeating myself over here, doing the same thing. And I'll do English and Spanish. The text we are translating, a date and a time. Select both of these, center vertically and horizontally, or actually I don't want to center it like that. Just leave this over here and select both, group them and move it over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, move this down, and I'll change the color of this background to light blue to mimic we have selected it. I'll duplicate this whole frame, come back over down here, and delete the first one, or actually select the first one, select the background, and change the background color to match this blue one. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to delete the second one and without moving anything. So when we're transitioning between two frames, it doesn't look kind of messed up. So what we're simulating here is users input something, they click on translate, and they'll see the second translation they selected, they will display accordingly. And I want to also duplicate this frame again and come back and select the first one and set the background to be blue. And the second item, set the background to be white. Okay, so we kind of created, and you can add the text, come here and individually add the text messages so it reflects what we're doing. Essentially, you could change basically what I mean is you can come and change this text so you're simulating a new sentence that you're translating, and upon each selection, the values that are displayed on the right changes. I'll skip that and just go directly to the prototype mode. And from here, so on the very left item, once translate is clicked, we'll go to the second view. And if user switches back to this view, clicks on this translation, we'll move to this view. And if they click back on the latest translation, I'll animate to this other view. And from here, once we confirm, from confirm, we can come to this bottom view right here. So with that view set up, let's select our registration and click on play. All right, so we got our registration page. User clicks on register. If they cancel, they go back to register, click on register, confirm. They've logged in. This is the user page. They'll click on translate. So we get a new translation here. They can move back to the other translation or move forward and back and forward. And there you go. We created our prototype showcasing wireframe, the concept that we were interested in creating. So with this, you can go ahead and finish up create the public translation, login, logout, which is very similar to this. Essentially, you know everything you need to know in order to create this preliminary and very simple mockups. However, it's better to watch the next few videos, which I'll cover the following topics: variables, very similar to programming, what they are, components, component variants, and interaction between components, auto layout, and sections. These are the elements that make Figma unique. And without these, creating mockups like these are not very efficient, not very Figma-esque. So I'll cover these in the next few videos. With that said, thank you for watching. If you decide to watch the next few videos, I'll have a few points I'd like to talk about UI and UX design. So initially, I raised the point, why do developers need to even learn Figma? And there are multiple reasons. First off, you might be working for a small company or a startup, and you don't have the resources to hire a separate a designer to do UI, UX. If you are a company that has the funding and monetary capability to hire someone, you have the option to hire a designer who knows, in addition to UX, UI, knows how to do motion graphics, for example, if you do marketing, Photoshop, typography, and basic graphical design functions. So bigger companies like the FANG, they hire people who only do UI, UX. They don't do everything. However, as small companies, you need to look for people who know the different aspects of graphic design as well, including UX, UI. And I've worked for a lot of companies that completely skipped UX design. This is a very important step if you're building projects or if you're building application that's user-facing. Essentially, think of building a house or structure or an apartment without having an architectural diagram or an interior design plan. You'll come up with something that's not planned and not very user friendly, and all this time and energy that's been spent on building these buildings will kind of go to waste, because with a little bit of planning, you'll take those next steps to make your software pleasing to use and easy to use, and eventually that translates to more sales. The other reason why some companies don't hire UX people is because the technology that they're creating is very technical. For example, if you're working for a company that's creating rendering engines, and these rendering engines will have certain pipelines for their graphics engine, you might need to know some. You need to know some background information about these pipes, how they're connected, how a texture might be affecting the material. So you have to have some graphics knowledge. And to have someone on board, a UX UI designer who doesn't know these technical details, you have to teach him or you have to give him time to learn. Sometimes it's easier just for the SME or project lead to jump in and create very preliminary, high-level wireframes conveying the ideas. And then maybe later on, after implementing it, you can hire a UX UI person to make it much more nicer, because you already have some sort of fundamentals flow already designed and iterated. And sometimes you, as a developer, you might want to just convey your ideas to the rest of the team or to your client, and you don't have that time to request and explain your ideas to a UX or UI person. Might be too long. Let's say you're on the trip and then the client says something and you whip up something really quick. On the next meeting, you show them to say, hey, we had a discussion, and is this what you're looking for? So knowing Figma is actually, in my opinion, very useful, especially if you're a dev who's leading a project, who's talking to customers or clients. Definitely this is something that's far useful, because at the end, majority of people are visual learners. So if you want to convey your ideas, it's far more effective if you can convey them visually. I've had this experience among friends, families, companies. If I explain something verbally, especially if your English is your second or third language, it's much more difficult. Or even if you're not a native speaker, just expressing ideas, especially as a developer as well, it's not that easy. Presenting your ideas visually, and on top of that, explaining it, is far more effective. The other point I'd like to make is, even though you'll be making these wireframes, you might not be creating the most effective or streamlined user workflow. A UX UI professional who does this full time, all the time, will create a far better result, far better outcome than you. Because similar to an architect, when an architect walks into a room, they start noticing things about the building, the apartment, that you as a normal person would subconsciously just look at it and not even understand. So same thing with UX. There's quite a lot of things going on. Just to bring you an example, a UX person might see this and say, hey, this is fine. But what if user has thousands of translations? They're not going to scroll through all of these. You need some sort of a search parameter here, or filter, or you need some sort of a grouping mechanism, whatnot. So these are the things that a professional UX UI person would definitely notice. Also, what we didn't really follow the study of UX UI. What we've done is we created a wireframe using Figma. UX UI is a field of study that has so many different steps that we skipped all of those because we didn't really need them here. Those steps include such as research, taking surveys, testing with some few customers, and revising it. We skipped all of those. We jumped straight into wireframe. Okay, with all that said, hopefully you learned something from this video. If you'd like to learn more, and I encourage you to do so, watch the next 3 videos, which I'll explain you all the Figma specific utilities to make your UI workflow, to make your wireframing experience much more pleasant and much more professional. All right, have a good one. See you in the next video.